The first restored frames of 1939 do not show generals or marching armies, but women standing in doorways with ration cards folded like secret maps in their hands, eyes scanning the street as if already sensing the long shadow that was about to stretch across the world. And behind the grain of the film, you can almost hear the quiet machinery of fear beginning to turn. Because before the first bombs fell, before the uniforms and slogans hardened into routine, it was women who absorbed the initial shock of history, recording in diaries that were later burned or hidden how the air itself seemed to thicken as Europe slid toward war. And in Warsaw, in Berlin, in London, and in 1,000 unnamed villages, they were already being drawn into intelligence networks without knowing it. Their kitchens becoming listening posts where a careless word could mean life or death. As German counterintelligence reports from late 1939 revealed an unexpected spike in intercepted information, traced not to military officers, but to housewives who had memorized train schedules and whispered them into telephones that were supposed to be dead. When the Wehrmacht crossed borders and the world fractured, women were the ones who moved through the cracks, slipping past curfews with baskets that hid microfilm beneath bread, a method so effective that the Abwehr issued internal warnings about what they called the bread couriers, female resistance members who used the rhythms of domestic life as camouflage. And in occupied France, the British Special Operations Executive built entire circuits around women because they could pass checkpoints with a credibility no man could match. Their forged papers often inspected with less suspicion, a bias that became a weapon as lethal as any rifle. And in declassified SOE files, there was a quiet acknowledgement that more than half of the earliest successful sabotage operations were planned or executed by women whose names were never meant to be remembered, their stories folded into classified folders and forgotten in archives that only recently began to breathe again. In the grainy, restored reels from 1940, you sometimes see women in factories, faces smeared with oil, hands moving with the mechanical precision of survival. But behind those images lies a hidden war that rarely made it to film, where female cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park sat in cold huts deciphering German enigma messages that determined the fate of convoys and cities. Their work so secret that many died without ever telling their families what they had done. And among them was a quiet group of linguists and mathematicians who cracked not only codes but the psychology of their enemy, learning the habits of German operators so intimately that they could predict when a careless repetition would reveal an entire U-boat fleet, a victory that saved thousands of sailors while remaining invisible to the public for decades. Across the Channel, in the heart of Nazi Germany itself, women were also fighting a war that history tried to erase. From the students of the White Rose who typed forbidden pamphlets at night, knowing that the Gestapo was closing in, to secretaries in government offices who altered documents just enough to save lives, their resistance so subtle that it survived even inside the bureaucracy of terror. And in one little-known case from 1942, a female clerk in the Reich Security main office rerouted transport lists, delaying a train of prisoners long enough for several to escape, an act discovered only after the war when survivors pieced together why a single train had vanished from the machinery of death. The cameras that recorded women marching in Nazi uniforms were real, but so was the quiet rebellion behind their eyes. Because even inside organizations like the Bund Deutsche Mädel, some girls were acting as couriers for underground networks, hiding notes in songbooks and slipping coded messages into communal meals, a double life that required a kind of psychological fracture that few could endure. And post-war interrogations revealed how these young women learned to speak in layers, every sentence carrying a surface meaning and a hidden one, a survival skill that became as critical as any weapon on the front lines. In Eastern Europe, where the war was not just a conflict but an extermination,
women were often the last witnesses, smuggling photographs of massacres to the West in false-bottomed suitcases, evidence that would later become part of the Nuremberg trials. And one Polish courier, whose real name remains sealed in British archives, traveled more than 2,000 miles on foot and by train, carrying microfilmed proof of the Warsaw Ghetto's destruction, evading both German patrols and Soviet suspicion, a journey that reads like fiction but was confirmed by Allied intelligence reports that credited her with one of the earliest verified accounts of the Holocaust reaching London. On the other side of the world, women were shaping the war in ways that were no less secret, as Chinese and Filipino resistance fighters used their perceived invisibility to move through Japanese-occupied territories, passing information to Allied submarines waiting off darkened coasts. And in the Philippines, a network of women operating under the guise of market vendors transmitted naval movements using a code based on fish prices, a system so effective that American commanders later admitted it gave them a clearer picture of Japanese logistics than aerial reconnaissance ever could. The psychological warfare of World War II also bore a woman's imprint, from the voices broadcast over shortwave radio to undermine enemy morale, to the carefully constructed rumors that spread through occupied cities. And among the most enigmatic figures was the so-called Tokyo Rose, a label applied to several women whose broadcasts mixed music with subtle propaganda. But declassified Japanese and American documents show that at least one of these women was secretly feeding coded information to Allied intelligence, embedding coordinates and weather data in seemingly harmless chatter. A double game so dangerous that even after the war, her true role remained buried under accusations and myth. On Britain, in the Auxiliary Territory Service, women were trained to operate anti-aircraft guns and radar systems, their work officially downplayed but quietly acknowledged in internal memos as critical to the defense of London during the Blitz. And in the dark rooms where radar screens glowed like ghostly maps, young women learned to read the invisible movements of German bombers, guiding pilots to intercept them in a battle fought entirely in the realm of signals and shadows, a war of unseen lines that decided whether entire neighborhoods would survive the night. The restored archives sometimes show smiling nurses tending to wounded soldiers, but behind those images was another layer of combat, as medical units were often used as cover for intelligence gathering, their ambulances crossing front lines with information hidden in bandages and morphine kits. And in North Africa, a group of Allied nurses passed along detailed maps of German supply routes to British command, information gathered from overheard conversations in makeshift hospitals, where even the most disciplined soldiers let their guard down when they thought they were safe. In the Soviet Union, women were not only snipers and pilots, but also spies, operating in a labyrinth of double agents and counterintelligence that blurred the line between loyalty and survival. And the famous Night Witches, the all-female bomber regiment, were just the visible tip of a much deeper network of female operatives who infiltrated German-occupied villages, posing as refugees or farm workers, while sending back reports on troop movements. Their work so effective that German forces began issuing orders to treat any woman near the front as a potential spy, a paranoia that itself became a weapon used against them. The psychological toll of this hidden war was immense, and diaries recovered decades later reveal how these women lived with the constant awareness that a single mistake could doom not only themselves, but entire networks. And in one haunting entry from a French resistance member, she wrote that she no longer knew which version of herself was real, the one who laughed with German officers at a cafe, or the one who memorized their schedules to plan their deaths. A split existence that left scars far deeper than any physical wound.
In Italy, women working as translators for the German military were quietly feeding misinformation into the system, subtly altering orders and sowing confusion that slowed troop movements during critical moments of the Allied invasion, a form of sabotage that was nearly impossible to detect because it looked like simple clerical error.
and post-war Allied analyses found that these small distortions in communication may have saved thousands of lives by delaying German responses at key points along the front. As the war dragged on, the networks grew more complex, and women often became the nodes that held them together, maintaining safe houses, coordinating drops, and managing funds in a shadow economy that kept resistance alive. And in the Netherlands, a group of female couriers used children's bicycles to move weapons and documents through German checkpoints, their apparent harmlessness allowing them to pass while armed men would have been stopped, a strategy that turned societal expectations into a strategic advantage. The darker side of this story cannot be ignored because women were also used by the Nazi regime in its own intelligence operations, trained as seductresses and informants to extract secrets from Allied officers. And in neutral countries like Switzerland and Sweden, these operatives moved through diplomatic circles with practiced ease, gathering information that was fed back to Berlin, a reminder that the hidden war was not a simple tale of heroes and villains, but a web of human choices entangled in ideology and survival. In the final years of the conflict, as cities burned and empires crumbled, women continued to operate in the shadows, organizing evacuations, smuggling refugees, and negotiating with both sides to secure fragile corridors of safety. And in Budapest, a group of Jewish women posing as Red Cross workers forged thousands of protective documents that allowed families to escape deportation, an operation so vast that it rivaled any official diplomatic effort, yet remained almost entirely undocumented until survivors began telling their stories decades later. The restored film of 1945 shows women celebrating in the streets, but behind their smiles were memories of secrets that could never be spoken, of friends who disappeared into prisons or unmarked graves, of messages sent and never answered. And even as the war officially ended, the intelligence agencies that had relied so heavily on women quietly pushed them back into anonymity, sealing their files and erasing their names in the name of national security. What remains now are fragments, flickering images and half-declassified reports that hint at a vast invisible army of women who fought not just with guns or factories, but with minds trained to navigate fear, deception, and loyalty in a world that was constantly collapsing around them. And as these restored archives continue to surface, they reveal a truth that history tried to bury, that the outcome of World War II was shaped not only by the men who commanded armies, but by the women who moved silently through the spaces between them, carrying the weight of a war that was as much psychological as it was physical, a war that still echoes in the shadows of the present, waiting to be fully understood.